Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening. You know how it goes. Whenever you might be catching us, welcome to the Richard Watkins Podcast. Wherever you might be catching us, welcome to the Richard Watkins Podcast. I know you can check us out anywhere, whether you're riding a bus, sitting in the back of a lift, or on the toilet. It doesn't matter where you are. Thank you for joining us on another amazing episode of the Richard Watkins Podcast. Again, this show is for both morning birds and night owls. So, no matter the time, I'm happy that you're here. Remember, the Richard Watkins Podcast is a proud production of the Science Policy Action Network, the leading research, consulting, and engagement firm based right here in North Carolina. Find out more information about the Science Policy Action Network or SPAN at span-inc.org. Again, that's span-inc.org. Now, with that out of the way, let's get the proceedings proceeding. Hey, listen, the Richard Watkins podcast, we're all about lifelong learning, right? Now, I know a lot of folks can consider learning to be boring, and that's all right. Maybe we should do a whole episode on boredom. A lot of folks are saying that people need to be okay with boredom. I was talking to a friend of mine, and friends are interesting. He was like, I love your podcast. I think it's absolutely incredible. I love what you're doing. And I was like, what episode did you watch? And he was like, I'll have to be honest with you. I haven't watched any episodes. It's just kind of boring. Those subjects don't necessarily speak to me. And I was like, okay, you know, what didn't hurt my feelings at all. Listen, boredom is something that happens to a lot of people, right? So it's not a big deal. Well, one of the things that, is really interesting is there is a bystander could listen to that conversation and question that individual's intelligence because we have conversations about artificial intelligence, about the origins of the concept of fatherhood and how it has changed over time. We talk about energy production, the interface between innovation and people, virology. We talk about Alzheimer's. We've talked about the psychology of children who have been diagnosed with cancer. And they could hear that and they'd be like, if you find those subjects to be boring, then you must not be smart or you must not be intelligent. That is something that happens a lot, right? We look at someone's interest and make a determination about their intelligence. We do that all the time, right? If a person's not interested in a certain thing that we feel validates our own sense of intelligence, then we oftentimes will look at people who don't partake in that as being intelligent. But here's the thing. We don't really have a good definition for intelligence, like a good working definition for intelligence. If I read to you the Webster's Dictionary definition of intelligence, you might think to yourself, wait, this person that I once thought wasn't intelligent is more intelligent than I thought they were. This is the Webster's Dictionary definition of intelligence: the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. That's it. That's it. Acquire knowledge, acquire skills, and apply knowledge, apply skills. That's it. So if you're able to acquire knowledge, right, and you're able to apply that knowledge that you've acquired, that is intelligence, right? It but it gets really sticky though, right? Because under that definition, the most intelligent you will ever be is when you're a baby. I mean, just going off of that definition, right? Because let's really think about it, right? We look at all of these older people, myself or whatever, as being intelligent. I don't know if anybody looks at me at being intelligent. I once saw somebody post, um, the podcast host is the most unintelligent person ever. I was like, okay. I don't know what to say to that. Ever the most unintelligent person ever? How did you assess this? Right? Before you discovered me, who was the most unintelligent person before you discovered me? Right? And who is the most intelligent? So it just really got me thinking, like, what does intelligent mean? And intelligence is a weird thing. We are very comfortable with people having physical, right? Having physical advantages over someone else. We're absolutely cool with that, right? You know, if we can't dunk a basketball or if we can't run a 4 second flat 40, it's okay. We know that other people can and we're cool with it, right? We don't have a problem, right? If we're in the presence of somebody who is more athletically gifted than we are, or someone who's taller than we are, like, we are okay with that. We're not okay with grappling with the fact that we are in the presence of someone who is smarter than us or someone who's more intelligent than us. But that also begs the question, is smart and intelligent even the same thing? We know that there are a lot of different types of intelligence, right? We have knowledge acquired that's not valued by society. And so that acquisition of knowledge is part of the definition of intelligence. However, if society doesn't value that knowledge that you have acquired, then society will not look at you and not treat you as if you are intelligent. And you will go off thinking that you're not smart, but you in fact are. It's just that you have a knowledge base that the majority of society doesn't value or doesn't appreciate. It doesn't mean you're not intelligent. And I know identity goes both ways. There is kind of that internal identity, but then there's also that external identity, right? We end up becoming how we are viewed by other people. So we both have like that internal sense of self, but there's an external sense of self. And so if your external inputs are never telling you that that knowledge that you have is of value, then you will be looked at as unintelligent. But that doesn't mean that you are unintelligent. Also, applying those skills in a wide variety of ways is also really important and also part of intelligence. But yeah, we talk about intelligence like it's obvious, right? Who has it, who doesn't. But when you actually work on like looking at defining it, like it gets weird really, really fast, right? So here's some questions for you when you're thinking about intelligence. Is intelligence fixed? Or can it change over time? Like, can you become more intelligent, right? Can you just know more? Is it simply the ability to apply the knowledge? Is it ability to seek that knowledge? And the more knowledge that you seek, are you becoming more intelligent? I don't know the answer to that, right? I know you're out there and you might know the answer because you will feel like you're intelligent. But also, Tom, well, what I've also noticed is that intelligent people have this constant sense of like questioning oneself, right? Like, am I not? Do I know this? Right? You're always on the fence. You're not ever quite sure of yourself or what you know. And I think that comes part of the more you know, the more you realize how little you know. And I think that comes part of it, right? People often talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect, whereas, you know, the less you know about something, like if you know a little bit, but you only know a little bit, right? The you think you know a lot about it. you overvalue how much you feel like you know because you know a little bit. But the opposite is true. A lot of times, people who know a lot and have been blessed with extraordinary intellectual gifts, one, they undervalue those gifts. Two, they don't actually really understand that the people that are around them don't actually share that gift either. So they sometimes become terrible teachers because they're trying to explain something to people that they get in their head and they can't actually understand that the people that they're talking to, can't they can't figure it out like they can. And there's always this kind of assumption that they think like you or something like that. So it becomes really, really problematic. Again, it's also very, very difficult to assess your own intelligence. And it's also very difficult, again, because of the value that we place in certain bodies of knowledge to assess how intelligent someone else is. And that has huge implications, right? Like our education system is all based off of sets of knowledge that we have determined to be important, right? It's just a value. It's just a value proposition on bodies of knowledge. It doesn't necessarily mean you need it, and it doesn't define whether or not you're intelligent. However, we are made to feel as if we're not intelligent or intelligent based off of our circumstances and environment and situations, right? So we can talk about a few things, right? So I already talked about how we define intelligence, right? Now, the classic view is like IQ, right? Intelligence quotient. What does IQ stand for? Let's see. Oh, and we also have a tendency to look at somebody as not intelligent if they don't believe or feel or think about something the way we do. And so intelligence has a very kind of like subjective aspect to it, but it also has this aspect of we want people to mirror how we think and feel about things. And the further away from that, often we tend to view them as not being intelligent, right? So yeah, so intelligence quotient is what IQ stands for, and that's a number representing a person's reasoning ability, measured using problem-solving tests, as compared to statistical norm or average of their age, taken as 100. I don't even know that last part, but that first part just says it's a number. Um, that comes from measuring somebody's reasoning and problem solving. I've never taken an IQ test. I mean, I don't know how smart I am. I have no idea. But people tell me I'm smart, so I guess I am. I don't know. Again, it's just a reflection of how people feel about you, right? So yeah, that's pretty cool, right? Now, in broader views, we look at intelligence as analytical intelligence, right? And that's problem solving, that's logic. You've got creative intelligence, right? That's novel ideas, coming up with an idea, right? That's a very difficult thing to do. And then that the synthesis of that idea, right? Because you can have an idea in your head, but actually communicating that, putting it together, putting it on paper, letting people know. Because oftentimes when things are floating around in our head, they're like fragments of ideas, right? But to put it into one solid idea, that's that synthesis of that idea. And that's also a very difficult process. You got practical intelligence that's navigating the society that you're in, right? Navigating real world situations. And then obviously, one that you've all heard about, that is social and emotional intelligence, right? That's being able to read people, right? Understand people and managing relationships, right? That's all part of it. And going off of all that I've said about intelligence, it's really hard to say that we've got a firm grasp of it or to say this person is intelligent, right? Stop, right? Because further assessment of that individual, you can see that they have certain types of intelligence, but maybe not others, right? And it's very difficult to have all of those, right? And then also we've had conversations about nature and nurture, and it's really difficult to really figure out what all goes into intelligence, right? We do know that nature plays a big role in intelligence, right? That's that biological aspect of intelligence, right? What are we getting or what are we inheriting from our parents? Are we taking their intelligence and that is us, right? So if you have very intelligent parents, again, poorly defined, very intelligent parents, then you will have an intelligent child. Or if you have unintelligent parents, will you have an unintelligent child? I mean, it's kind of hard to think that somebody can't acquire knowledge, right? I mean, that's part of intelligence. So everybody, I suppose, has intelligence. Everybody is intelligent. There's the ability to do things, acquire knowledge. Again, it's all like a value base, but everybody can figure out something in some regards. Navigating some spaces may be more difficult for some people than others, but they're able to do something. So everybody has intelligence, at least in my opinion. But again, that reading people, managing relationships, that's really hard, right? I mean, if you just think about managing relationships, and one huge relationship is a marriage, right? 50% of marriages end in divorce, right? So does that mean 50% of individuals who are involved in marriages lack emotional intelligence? Possibly, or maybe not. Maybe the divorce is indicative of emotional intelligence. And maybe the lack of emotional intelligence is actually what's required to stay in a marriage. It's very difficult. And we don't think about these things often. And because we don't, it's hard for us to really figure out what we mean when we say these things. And quite often, language is just littered with the utilization of words that are not accompanied with a working definition, right? People are just using it and they're just assuming that the audience or the people receiving that message know exactly what they're talking about, but that's not always the case, right? So, if we're going to zoom out and we talk about intelligence in a society, right? We have to kind of really think about where intelligence it plays out. So, so being all right, let's back up really quick. Again, we really value intelligence. We really value intelligence, but we don't really know what it is. We really value intelligence, but again, we don't really know how to define it. We really value intelligence and we say it all the time, but we actually don't even know what we're looking for, right? So we're taking all that together, right? But there is a pressure to be intelligent or to seem intelligent. We see that in language. Language is huge, right? There is a theory, and I forget I'm not sure if it's a mathematician or physicist or just a philosopher that said you're only as intelligent as you are able to communicate, right? So if you can't express an idea, you can't communicate an idea through some medium, you're not intelligent. And so it's wrapped up in language, right? And so one of the first ways that we really assess whether or not somebody is intelligent or not is how they speak. Now, again, it's extraordinarily subjective. How they speak must fit into, it must fit within the range of acceptance of the listener. So the listener has an expectation of what a smart or intelligent person is supposed to sound like. It has nothing to do with whether or not that person is in fact intelligent. It's just that we look for shortcuts constantly to come to decisions, right? To make judgments. And in the absence of an IQ test and in the absence of an understanding of how somebody is analytically intelligent, creative intelligence, practical intelligence, or social emotional intelligence, but without an understanding of people's capacity for those four different types of intelligence, we take shortcuts. And that biggest shortcut is how someone speaks. How someone speaks. And if it doesn't fall within that range of acceptability, we often say that that person is not intelligent. It's very, very quick. And so people know this. And so when that individual who wants to be perceived as smart is given a platform, they will they they will work extremely hard to have their language communicate their intelligence. And we know that this is a case, or this is the case, when someone's language is corrected. So I often have difficulties communicating my ideas. I get tongue tied in the midst of a thought. I will forget that word, and it could be a simple word, right? And I'm just like, I just forget the word, right? And so everybody, has difficulty, but people work really hard in certain situations to have their language communicate their intelligence. And again, they're not the same, but because of what I said earlier, you're only as intelligent as you're able to communicate. And that thought is pervasive and ubiquitous throughout our society. People go through great lengths. And again, you know this because when someone is corrected, quite often the response of the individual is defensive, especially if they are not secure in how they are viewed, right? So if you have an individual who is like confident, like there is no one who interacts with me that is going to think anything other than I'm intelligent, right? If you're confident in that, you're very, very comfortable with admitting that you don't know something, right? That was one of the things that was absolutely critical in my PhD training is developing the confidence to say, I don't know, right? Even if you do know, if you feel like you kind of don't know, just say you don't know. I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one. Let me think about that. You know what? I don't know. Like that is something that has come with my training. However, just because you receive that training don't mean you're gonna do it because gosh, some people just hate to admit they don't know something, right? Or hate to admit that they're wrong. It's extraordinarily painful because intelligence is so highly valued that people will go to great lengths to communicate their intelligence or to give off the impression that they are intelligent. And keep in mind, I always have to go back. Intelligence is poorly defined. So like you're like jumping through hoops trying to communicate how intelligent you are. And you should just why does it even matter? Because nobody really knows what it is. And it's more than just articulation, right? It's more than just speech, right? But because that is a shortcut that people take, people do it. And so, I think the word that you meant was this. Oh no, no, I said what I meant. Oh, I said what I meant. You want here's a classic one. You understood what I said, right? Yeah. Oh, so you need to correct me, did it? So because it is painful for people's identity to be challenged, right? Especially if it's an identity that they are working to push forward. And if you challenge that identity, especially in public, now maybe if it's just one-on-one dialogue, maybe they'll let it pass. Maybe they'll say, "Oh, oh, that's how you say that? Oh, I thought it was off 10. It's not off, it's often." What? Just examples like that, right? Because intelligence is just so highly valued. And we actually don't talk about it enough. Well, I don't know. Maybe people talk about it all the time. I have no idea. But intelligence is a really tricky thing, right? So if it is that the shortcut that we are often taking is language, then we have to then look at nurture because language is shaped by your environment and by your upbringing, right? And also, what is also shaped by that nurturing component and environment are the standards that the society has put into place, right? Again, it doesn't mean you're intelligent or not intelligent. It just means that this is the expectation that society has for you. It doesn't at all have anything to do with how intelligent you actually are. It might have something to do with how successful you'll be, yes, but success and intelligent are not the same thing. That's another mistake that people make. They equate success with intelligence, and those are two different things, right? Yes, you want to be successful, right? If you can be unintelligent and successful or intelligent and unsuccessful, I think most people would just choose successful because who cares? If you're successful, who cares at that point? But they're not the same thing. Usually, success has a lot to do with being able to fit within perfectly societal expectations and being able to meet the expectations that society has. And society has preferences that exist. And if you are able to fit within those preferences without much strain, then chances are you will find success. And then that success will be viewed as intelligence, again, because of societal expectations and because society and your environment places different values on different knowledge sets or different intelligence capacities, right? Society will put way more emphasis on practical intelligence than any of those other intelligences. Like, that's what I believe. I would say practical intelligence, yeah, that's number one. But I think the biggest intelligence is social and emotional intelligence. I think that's the number one in my opinion. I could be wrong. They're all important. I don't know if one's more important than the other. Just looking at them here. And I'm not saying that this is an exhaustive list. These are only four, right? But you've got analytical, creative, practical, social, and emotional. That's hard. I don't know which one. You need them all. Not all of them are valued. Like creative intelligence is a huge one, but I just don't know. Like I know our education system doesn't necessarily value that one. Analytical intelligence, education values that one. But that's it. I think our educational system really values analytical intelligence, but really nothing else. And I don't know, not maybe not even completely analytical intelligence, like logic. I don't know. I think another conversation will have to be, does intelligence and education have anything to do with each other? That's a good one, right? So intelligence in society, some things to really kind of zoom out and look at, right? Again, we talked about schools. How do schools reward certain intelligence but not others? We touched on that a little bit. How the workplace defines smart, right? Defines intelligence. That is almost identical to school, right? School, workplace, they're basically the same thing. School is to accomplish two things. One, to allow parents to work, so it's childcare, and two, to produce more workers. And so the values of the workplace and the values of the classroom may at times be similar. That's just be due to the nature of those institutions or those environments. Why people who are highly intelligent in one domain struggle in another? That's a good question. I guess you just can't have it all. All right. I guess you can't have all the intelligence, right? I mean, I guess very rarely do you find somebody who's analytically intelligent, practically intelligent, emotionally intelligent, and creative all rolled into one. But Yeah, sometimes you do, I guess. Um, the danger of, again, these things can't measure them really. I think that IQ test tries, but it leaves a lot out. So it's hard to really measure these things. Now, the danger with equating intelligence with worth and moral values, that's a huge one, right? There is being smart does not make you good at all. It doesn't make you better than anyone. Being intelligent does not make you a better person, right? That is it. Hard stop. That is it. Period. Point blank. We do value it a lot. And because we value it, we tend to look at people who are intelligent as being better, but that is not the case, right? People who are intelligent can still be morally corrupt. Oftentimes we find that that is the case. And it could be seen as the, as your, how do I put this, right? As your intelligence decreases, your innocence increases. I mean, I don't know if that's, I feel like that's close, right? So what we end up seeing, what we end up saying is like in the animal kingdom, right? The more intelligent an animal seems to be, what also seems to be the case is the more cruel that they are, right? Say, for instance, the killer whale or orca, one of the most intelligent animals in the sea, play with their food, torture their food, treat penguins like tubes of toothpaste where they squeeze the meat out of the penguin, like unsheath it. They hunt for fun. They, like I said, they play with their food. Chimpanzees are violent towards other chimpanzees, are just absolutely brutal. Um, and so maybe that's a thing. My whole point is intelligence does not mean moral, right? It doesn't. Some of the most intelligent people in the world have been responsible for heinous atrocities, absolutely heinous atrocities. And we look across the board throughout history at societies that excel in art and excel in science and technology, doing horrific things to other people that when time goes by, they look back and they're like, whoa, that was horrible. It's just that intelligence has nothing to do with how good you are, right? It should not necessarily equate to your value of a person. But again, because we value it so much, we do. If here's another thing, another example in history, some of the people who have committed some of the most heinous acts, if they are extraordinarily intelligent, they have often been given passes because their intelligence is of such great use and need by society that people have looked past their atrocities so that society can benefit from their intelligence. And there's a long history of that. The United States has participated in it, other countries have participated in it. Because, I mean, the question is like, shouldn't my society benefit from this intelligence? Why do I let it go to waste just because somebody did something bad? That again, that's a moral conversation, a value conversation, but that is how it is viewed. And again, so much value is placed on intelligence. Yeah, yeah. I just think it's just really really amazing, right? Just how we really look at intelligence and also how access, right, to knowledge is restricted, right? That's another piece of evidence that shows how much we value intelligence. If intelligence is defined as the acquisition and the application of knowledge, and knowledge and information is restricted, that is evidence of the importance or the extraordinary value that we put on intelligence. So much so that we restrict access to information, which is important for intelligence, to select predetermined groups of individuals or predetermined institutions. And that's just really, really important. So I know that there's always that feeling that we don't value intelligence, or whoever's the dumbest person gets the. That's not at all the case. We live in a very, very intellectually dependent society. If you are viewed as being intelligent, you have access to things that other people do not have. And if the definition of intelligence involves the acquisition and the application of knowledge, then what I attempt to do here with this podcast is provide you easy access to information in the form of these conversations. I urge you to check out everything that I am talking about so you look in more depth of these issues. If intelligence is defined simply by the pursuit, the acquisition, and the application of knowledge, then simply watching this podcast and having a discussion with your friends and family will make you a more intelligent person. I have been your host, Dr. Richard Watkins. This has been the Richard Watkins Podcast, which is a proud production of the Science Policy Action Network. Visit them at span-inc.org. And remember, the future is not something to wait for, it is something to build. And until next time, take care.